The first drops fell like a whisper soft, almost shy as if the sky were reluctant to wake the world below. The sleepy town stirred only slightly. Shutters blinked once. A cat curled tighter on a windowsill. Somewhere, behind old stone walls, a kettle sang its morning hymn. Mira opened her umbrella. It was a dark blue one, frayed at the edges and stitched with silver thread that caught the streetlight like falling stars. She held it with the care of someone holding a memory, not just a tool for the rain. Cobblestones echoed beneath her boots as she stepped into the drizzle. The town was hushed, wrapped in the gentle hush of a mid-morning rain, neither storm nor mist, but a lullaby and droplets, the kind of rain that didn't rush, didn't roar, just stayed, as if it belonged here, as if it had always known this town. Shops were still shuttered. Wooden signs creaked faintly in the breeze. Names worn soft by time. Mrs. Ello's pastry, the tattered page, Horace's umbrellas and walking sticks. Mira passed them slowly, her pace unrushed, as if walking through an old story she didn't want to end. The scent of rain on stone, the ancient troves around her. Vines climbed the brick walls like dreams in slow motion. Ivy drooped, with water beads, each leaf holding the sky in miniature. Above her, her umbrella murmured with each drop, a steady patter like a heart remembering something long ago. She liked the town best, like this, between sleep and wakefulness, when it hadn't yet put on its daily mask, when doorbells hadn't rung and bicycles hadn't yet clattered across the square. This was the hour for memories, for ghosts who didn't frighten, only watched. She felt them sometimes, sitting on benches, leaning on lampposts, watching her pass with smiles that knew more than words. The umbrella was her shield, but also her companion. With it, she didn't feel alone. She twirled it once, for no reason other than to feel the world swirl a little. By the bakery, a single curl of steam drifted from the chimney. The scent of warm bread and wet pavement mingled old comfort and new quiet. A sparrow fluttered from a windowsill, wings wet but not worried, following the invisible thread of its own morning journey. At the corner, Mira paused. The fountain was still. Rain had softened its edges, filled its basin, and painted the statues in glistening silver. A child's red paper boat, forgotten, half-sunken, floated near the edge. She watched it, and for a second, she was 7 again, chasing paper sails down gutters and puddles, laughing as if nothing else in the world mattered. She smiled. Let the boat drift. Her footsteps led her to the bridge. The river beneath was slow and thoughtful, like an old man walking with hands clasped behind his back. Mist curled along its banks, wrapping reeds and broken stone walls like a worn blanket. The rain dotted its surface gently, leaving tiny circles that widened and disappeared, messages that only water could read. Mira leaned on the rail and looked out. On the far bank, the weather vane atop, the old clockmaker's shop spun lazily. A dog barked once from a courtyard and then was silent again. In the distance, a curtain moved, as if someone had peeked through, then thought better of it. Everything was breathing slowly. She closed her eyes. This town, this sleepy, rain-soaked town, wasn't grand. It didn't bustle or dazzle, but it remembered. It held stories in its stone, lullabies in its lamplight. It was the kind of place that didn't speak loudly, but listened well. When Mira walked its streets like this, umbrella in hand and time slowed to the rhythm of rain, she felt part of something ancient and kind, as though the town itself walked with her, guiding, humming, watching over her shoulder like a gentle parent. A sudden gust tugged at her umbrella. She held it firm, laughed softly, and whispered, "I'm not going yet." She turned back, past the florist's where rain-soaked roses leaned against the glass, past the crooked alley with its moss-covered steps and the iron gate that never closed properly, past the stone lion with one broken tooth who guarded the library with a proud tilt of his head. The town was beginning to stir. A shopkeeper unlocked his door with a yawn and a stretch. The bells above jingled like laughter. A bicycle bell rang. A child in yellow boots splashed into a puddle and was gently scolded by a woman holding her own umbrella, bright and floral. Mira didn't quicken her pace. She let the world catch up. Raindrops slid down her umbrella in streams, gathering at the edges, falling like punctuation at the end of thoughts. She listened to them. They made no demands, only music. At the top of the hill, where the town's chapel stood with ivy draped over its bell tower, she paused again. The view stretched wide. Rooftops glistening, smoke curling, rain shimmering like a veil over everything. The whole town beneath her was wrapped in quiet poetry. She closed her umbrella. The rain now kissed her skin directly, soft and cool. She lifted her face to her eyes closed, a deep breath, and let herself be soaked, because sometimes, on mornings like this, you don't need to be protected. You just need to feel, to remember you are here. And the world is too, that it turns slowly and kindly when you let it. Mira stood like that a long while. Then, umbrella swinging at her side, she turned and walked back through the sleepy town, rain in her hair, memory in her steps, and a smile the town would remember, just like it always did. This piece explores the relationship between a woman named Mira and her town. The story unfolds through Mira's experience of an ordinary rainy morning. However, through her perspective, the mundane becomes extraordinary. Let us delve into what makes this story so compelling, and how it keeps you hooked to the very end. The magic begins with the opening line. The first drops felt like a whisper. Right from the start, the story establishes a dreamy, almost poetic atmosphere. The personification of the rain as a whisper sets the tone for the rest of the narrative, which flows at a leisurely pace, mimicking the gentle rhythm of the rainfall. This lulling effect is further enhanced by the detailed descriptions of the rain-soaked town, the shutters blinking, the cat curling up, even the kettle singing, all contribute to creating a vivid sensory experience for the reader. We can almost feel the coolness of the rain and hear the symphony of sound it creates as it falls. Mira's actions and thoughts drive the narrative forward. Her decision to take an umbrella stroll reveals much about her character. She is clearly someone who finds solace and perhaps even companionship in the rain. The choice of this seemingly ordinary object as a focus adds a layer of depth to the story. The umbrella becomes more than just a tool for protection against the rain. It transforms into a symbol of Mira's connection to the town and its history. The detail that it's a dark blue one, frayed at the edges and stitched with silver thread, gives us a glimpse into her personal world, hinting at stories and memories associated with this particular umbrella. The townspeople are another intriguing aspect of this narrative. The story tells us that the town remembers, that it holds stories in its stone. Mira seems to be in tune with this, with her noticing the subtle signs of life and the secrets hidden within the buildings. She feels a connection to the town and its inhabitants, both past and present. Even the idea that the town watches over her adds a touch of magic realism to the story, blurring the lines between reality and fantasy. As the story progresses, we get a deeper understanding of the significance of this rainy day. It's not just any day. It's a day when the boundaries between the real and the imagined become blurred. It's a day when Mira can truly connect with the essence of the town and its people. The climax comes when Mira closes her umbrella and lets the rain fall on her skin. This is a moment of complete surrender to the experience. She no longer needs protection because she is embraced by the very essence of the town. In this moment, she feels a sense of belonging, of being part of something larger than herself. The ending brings the story full circle. Mira walks back through the town, her hair full of rain, her steps echoing the memory of the town itself. The smile that the town will remember is a reminder of the profound impact this day has had on her. It's a smile that carries the weight of shared history, of silent stories, and of the gentle magic that unfolds on a rainy morning in a sleepy town. And that's all for today. If you found this analysis helpful and want more, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future uploads. Until next time, keep reading and discovering the magic in words. The rain followed her all the way to the sea, mixing with the waves and whispering secrets to the sand. She woke with the tide, the air salty and cool against her skin. Sea spray had bleached the covers, turning the blanket white as bone. Sunlight slanted through the gap in the curtains, tracing paths On the floorboards, beside her, the boy slept still, one arm flung wide, fingers curled as though reaching for something remembered. His chest rose and fell with each breath, steady and sure. She watched him for a moment, memorizing the curve of his cheekbone, the unruly lock of hair falling over his forehead. She traced the line of his jaw with her thumb, feeling the pulse point throb with life. In the corner, a spider spun its silver thread. Outside, the wind chased the clouds across the sky. Time had no urgency here. No rooster crowed. No chores awaited. Only the sea and the endless blue stretching beyond. When she finally stirred, the cabin was quiet. The boy was gone. As she slipped out of bed, the floor creaked under her weight. The kitchen was empty. The table set with yesterday's breakfast. A half-read book resting in the corner. She went to the window and pushed aside the curtains, watching the churning of the sea. The rain had brought the tide closer, lapping at the base of the cabin. Where had he gone? Was he chasing the horizon, trying to capture the wind? Had he always been this restless? Or was this restlessness born of the sea? Was this how he found solace? Or maybe madness? A piece of driftwood snagged on the rocks, bobbing up and down like an offering. She started searching the usual places first. The hidden cove, the cave with the secret waterfall, the rocky outcrop that became an island when the tide came in. Nothing. The whisper of the wind carried stories that made no sense. The cries of gulls were taunts. The rhythm of the waves mocked her with their silence. Finally, she climbed to the highest point of land she could find, overlooking the entire stretch of coast, the sea and sky bleeding into one another. The wind tore at her clothes. Her hair whipped around her face, tasting of salt and sky. And there he was, on a sliver of beach, smaller than a pinhead, in the vast canvas of the sea. He was kneeling by a rock pool, a miniature world of seawater trapped between stone and sky. A wave crashed behind him, stealing the ground from beneath his feet and swallowing him up to his knees. He didn't flinch, didn't seem to notice. He was tracing shapes in the sand with a stick, eyes fixed on some faraway horizon only he could see. She wanted to call out to him, to brush the damp hair from his face, to remind him that the sea could be cruel, that the waves could knock him off balance, drown his dreams, steal the laughter from his throat. But something held her back, a strange calm, deeper than the ocean's hush. She stayed on the cliff, watching him dance with the tides, shouting secrets into the wind. And in the quiet of the crashing waves, she heard him. In the endless ebb and flow of the sea, she saw their story written anew. He had found his poem, she realized, the one that lived in the hollow chambers of his heart. She wasn't in his story anymore. It was a truth that settled in her chest like a stone, cold and heavy. The tide shifted, inching forward. The water lapped at the base of the rock pool, threatening to spill into the vast expanse of blue. The boy straightened, seemingly unaware of the encroaching water. He looked up, eyes filled with a light she hadn't seen before. Not the sun, but something else, something wild and free. As the wave crashed over his feet, she understood. The sea had claimed him, not spitefully, but with a love so vast and unending, it echoed the depths of his own soul. The ocean didn't break him, it made him. In that moment, she saw a depth in his eyes that scared her, not with fear, but with wonder. The boy who once found solace in words was now writing a new story, one, without her, etched on a shoreline that would vanish with the next high tide. He wasn't lost, she told herself. He was found. And yet, as she watched him disappear into the endless blue, a single tear traced its way down her cheek. She wasn't afraid for him. She realized she was afraid for herself, for who she was, for what she might have been, and for the silent understanding that she'd loved him so fiercely, yet not enough to let him go. He found her later, sitting on the porch swing, its chains groaning like ancient bones. The rope cart had left long ago, taking with it the remnants of their dreams. The sea stretched endlessly before them, mirroring the vastness of the sky. Beside him the boy looked older. His clothes were damp, his hair plastered to his forehead. He held out a hand, palm up, offering her nothing and everything. In that gesture, she saw the echo of the boy she once loved, the one who sought refuge in words, in stories, in the shared silences of two souls, understanding each other without sound. The cabin had been empty when he returned, the bed unmade, the kettle cold. He'd found her note, the words still pinned to the window with a seashell. "I'm going home," it said. "The road stretches endlessly before me." And he understood, because in the language of the sea, they spoke the same words. The one who chases the horizon never truly arrives anywhere. They walked along the shore, in silence, the wind whipping strands of her hair across her face. With every step, the pieces of the day fell into place. The unanswered questions, the unspoken truths, the dreams they'd woven together like a tapestry of moonlight and sea foam. It was a homecoming of sorts, not to the place she'd left, but to the understanding that sometimes endings are just another beginning in disguise. The boy stopped by a rock, smoothed away the sand with his boot, and there it was, the red paper boat, just like the one she'd sent adrift on the stream that morning. He picked it up, unfolded it carefully, smoothing out the creases of their shared past. Inside, the poem lay curled like a seashell, its words a testament to the journey they'd taken, their hearts beating in unison with the rhythm of the waves. When the sky wept, she found him in the garden, kneeling beside a patch of stubborn weeds. His fingers, calloused and strong, coaxed life from the parched earth. She watched him, surprised by the ache in her chest. The sight of him, so at peace with the dirt under his nails, and the sun warming his skin. He'd always sought solace in words, finding comfort in the structured verses of poetry. But here he was, grounding himself in the raw reality of earth and sky. The rain had washed away the pretense, leaving him bare and vulnerable, like a seedling reaching for the light. The sky rumbled above, and the first fat raindrops splattered on the ground. He looked up, tilting his head to catch the water on his tongue. In that moment, she saw a reflection of the boy she once loved, the one who danced with words and painted pictures with his stories. But there was more, a resilience born of rain-soaked soil, a strength forged in the quiet moments of tending the earth. As the storm broke around them, enveloping them in its cool embrace, she realized that sometimes love isn't about finding someone who completes you, but about recognizing the masterpiece they already are. She stepped into the deluge, letting the rain wash over her, carry away the remnants of their shared past. Together, they stood in the downpour, not speaking, needing no words. The storm raged around them, but inside the fragile shelter of the greenhouse, they found solace in the rustle of leaves and the comforting patter of rain on glass. The boy looked up, his eyes shining with the light of 1,000 stories yet to be told. And she saw not just the reflection of the boy she once loved, but the man he was becoming. The storm abated, leaving behind the scent of petrichor and the hushed whispers of the wind through the leaves. The town wore a cloak of silver, its streets glistening with the promise of renewal. She knew it was time to let go, to set him free, to let the river carry her words out to sea. This piece is part of a series exploring the idea of liminal spaces. If you're new here, welcome. And night unfolded like a velvet shawl across the sleepy town. The rain had gentled to a mist, so fine it hung like breath in the air, touching everything with a silvery sheen. Street lamps glowed like low-hanging stars, their golden halos bending in the fog. The cobblestone paths shimmered beneath Mira's feet, as though the stones had remembered the moon and were trying to speak to it again. She walked with her umbrella resting on one shoulder, half open more for company than cover. Beside her, the black cat still followed, silent as a memory. Shops had closed. Doors latched. Only the sound of soft rain and the occasional creak of shutters remained. There was the hour when the town no longer performed for the world. It simply was. Old and kind. A place that let you listen to yourself again. Mira turned onto Bellmaker's Lane, where ivy-clad houses leaned into one another like old friends sharing secrets. She paused outside the clockmaker's window. Inside, the soft tick-tick-tick of gears hummed through the glass. Dozens of clocks lined a wall, some grand with carved faces, others small and humble, nestled like children in wooden frames. But Mira wasn't watching the clocks. She was watching the man behind the work table. He sat hunched, a magnifying lens perched over one eye, his hands careful. He lifted a watch in progress and wound it slowly. When he glanced up and saw her, he didn't wave but he smiled. Just once, a tiny curl of the lips, as if to say, "Still walking. Good." Mira nodded. She moved on, past the tailor's shop, where the mannequins wore capes and coats from another century, past the crooked stone archway that led to the hidden courtyard, where the wisteria bloomed in spring, past the bench where she'd once sat with her grandmother, sharing sugared oranges under a paper parasol. And then, the bookstore again. The lights inside the tattered page were dim now, but one remained lit in the back. A candle, perhaps, or just Mr. Arden refusing to end the story he was reading. Mira stepped beneath the awning, where the cat curled up at her feet. She leaned against the doorframe and let herself breathe. Here, the town held stillness like a gift. No one hurried. Nothing demanded. Above, a window creaked open, and the scent of lavender drifted down, mingling with rain and stone. Someone was humming a lullaby, faint, unhurried. It wrapped around Mira like a shawl. She closed her eyes. She'll let the music, the rain, the town, all of it carry her. When she opened them again, the moon had appeared low and round, slipping behind the drifting clouds like a shy performer peeking through the curtains. Its light touched the rooftops with a kind of silver forgiveness, painting halos around chimney tops and puddles. Mira stepped back into the street. Her boots made soft clicks on the wet stones. The cat followed again, tail flicking like a metronome. And then sudden laughter. She turned. In the square, two children were running through the fog, their boots splashing in puddles, their coats flaring behind them like wings. One held a paper lantern, glowing amber, dancing wildly in the wind. The other spun in circles, arms outstretched, catching the last of the drizzle on her tongue. A father called out gently from the bakery steps, "All right, time to come in." But the children only laughed again, echoing off the walls, bright and alive. Mira watched them as if she were watching a dream she once had, long ago. One of the girls turned, caught her eye, and smiled. Then they were gone back through the doorway, trailing wet footprints and wonder. The sky now, almost clear, revealed a few stars blinking softly. The rain had finally left, though its echo remained in the puddles and the dripping eaves. Mira walked toward the far edge of town, where the buildings thinned and the trees leaned in, whispering leaves over the path. Her umbrella, now dry, hung loosely in her hand. She passed the gate to the old orchard, its trees, bare but dignified. The wind rustled through them like fingers flipping through an old photo album. Somewhere in the grass, a frog croaked once, a small percussion in the orchestra of the night, and then she saw it, the bench beneath the sycamore, just before the fields opened. She said, "From here, the town looked like a painting. Glowing windows, smoky chimneys, narrow lanes that led nowhere, and everywhere. She could almost see the stories unfolding in each home. A pot of tea poured, a lullaby sung, a book finished, a letter written but not sent." Mira held her umbrella close and leaned back. This walk was never meant to go somewhere. It was meant to be somewhere with the town, with a quiet, with a self that only emerged when the world hushed. She smiled. And in that smile, the sleepy town smiled back. I spent much of last year traveling, and this past week has been my first full week back in one place. And I realized how much I miss walks like this. The ones that aren't about getting somewhere, but simply being in the process of wandering. There's something so comforting about aimless strolls in the rain, the rhythm of footsteps, the sound of water mingling together. Plus, there's a certain magic to how raindrops glisten on lampposts, on window panes, how they transform the familiar into something shiny and new. These moments of seeing the everyday through a fresh lens are what I love capturing in my photography. And I try to do the same here in these pieces. So I hope when you listen to these soundscapes, you feel that sense of childlike wonder re-emerging, how the world can feel brand new even in its familiarity. I also wanted to play with the idea of liminality, of in-betweenness, which is a key theme in this series. Liminal spaces are transitional places, moments in between. Think of a hallway, a doorway, a staircase. They're places we pass through, but in those passing throughs, we're also held. We're suspended in the act of going from one place to another. That feeling of being held is something I think we all crave. And sometimes it is in the simplest of things, like a soft rain on a quiet evening that we find it. It doesn't have to be a grand adventure or a sweeping change of scenery. Sometimes the biggest journeys are the ones inward, and it's the quiet walks, the gentle rains, the cozy corners that help us get there. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I hope this piece found you well, and wherever you are, I hope you find your own moments of peace and perspective. When the rain stopped, the town woke. It wasn't one of those mornings that roared awake, shaking loose sheets and rattling window panes. It wasn't brash or bold or loud. It was soft. Morning arrived, draped in fog, a pale light drifting through the gray, stretching across the tiled roofs like fingertips on piano keys. The rain had come in the night, turning cobblestone streets into reflective pools and filling gutters with whispers. It had eased before the first birdsong, leaving behind quiet puddles that held little pieces of sky. Trees stood damp and still, their leaves slick with memory. The wind had tossed them about the night before, whispering secrets to branches heavy with dew. Now the secrets hung, suspended, glistening. The town was waking again, but gently, as if not to disturb the dreams still caught in the corners of windows and eaves. In the center of the town square, a girl named Mira rose from the weathered edge of the fountain. She had slept there, curled beneath the spreading branches of an ancient sycamore, her threadbare blanket pulled tight against the night chill. Her umbrella lay beside her, dry now and useless. It had become a cane for wandering thoughts. She twirled it once, absently, and began her walk back toward the heart of the town. Who clung to her boots? Birdsong was returning, tentative and soft, like someone remembering the words to an old lullaby. A sparrow hopped from post to post, keeping pace with her steps, chirping now and then, as if remarking on the stillness. Mira smiled but didn't speak. This was not a time for conversation, only communion. As she passed through the narrow alley by the potter's house, she noticed a door left ajar. Light poured from it, warm and amber. Inside, a wheel spun slowly, and a pair of hands shaped wet clay, with the patience of someone who knew silence intimately. Mira paused at the doorway. The potter looked up, nodded once, and returned to his work. No words, just that. That was the way of this town. Acknowledgement, not interruption. Witnessing, not asking. She continued past the chapel, where a single candle had been left in the window. A quiet vigil, perhaps for no one in particular, perhaps just for the morning itself. The streets were still wet. Footprints told gentle stories. A dog walker, and galoshes a baker hurrying to unlock his door. Two children skipping side by side. Myra's own prince joined the constellation. Just one more quiet mark in a town that never forgot its wonder. Down in the square, a new smell drifted through the air, rosemary and warm crust. The bakery's door was open, and Mrs. Ello stood behind the counter, dusting flour from her hands. "Out walking again?" she asked, her voice like worn velvet. Mira nodded. "The rain stayed longer this time." Mrs. Ello smiled. "It always does, when it has something to say." A pause. Then she slid a small parcel across the counter wrapped in brown paper, tied with twine. Mira took it with a quiet thank you and stepped back into the square. She made her way to the fountain again. It was clear. No boats, no leaves, just water gently rippling in the soft light. She sat on its edge and opened the package. Inside, a small round loaf, rosemary and sea salt baked into its golden crust. She broke it in half. Steam rose like a sigh. The black cat returned, silent and dignified, and sat at her feet. She fed it a piece, then bit into the bread herself. It tasted like warmth, like kindness passed through hands, like the town's way of saying, "We saw you walking. We're glad you came back." Myra leaned back and looked up. The clouds were lifting now, revealing a canvas, a soft blue, the kind of sky that promised nothing dramatic, just presence, just a good day. She stayed there a while, sharing bread with the cat and watching the morning unfold. The clock tower struck 8. A soft chime rolled through the air like a ripple across still water. Shutters opened one by one. The florist arranged rain-kissed blossoms in the window, peonies, daffodils, violets spring. The barber flipped his sign to open. A boy on a bicycle whistled as he passed, trailing a kite on a string behind him. The sleepy town had stretched, yawned, and was waking fully now, but never loudly. Even its busy hours were laced with calm, like a song played on a muted piano. Mira rose. There was one last place to visit. She crossed the stone bridge, where the river now sparkled instead of whispered. On the far bank stood the orchard path, still muddy, still lined with crooked fences. At the end of it was the old house, painted blue once, now weathered gray. She hadn't been back in a long time. The gate creaked as she pushed it open. Grass grew high along the walkway, but the roses still climbed the wall, blooming despite the years. She stepped onto the porch. The rocking chair was still there. She sat, set her umbrella beside her. The house was empty now, but it didn't feel abandoned. It felt watched over. By the wind, by the vines, by the echo of voices that had once lived here, hers included. She looked out at the orchard, leafless in this season, but not lifeless, she remembered. Afternoon sped under the trees, sketching leaves into a notebook. Her grandmother's voice reading aloud, rain tapping the window while soup simmered, umbrellas drying by the door. Everything returns in towns like this, not to haunt you, just to remind you who you've been. The sun was rising higher now, light spilling like gold dust across the town's tiled roofs and chimney smoke. Mira stood, picked up her umbrella, and began walking back the way she came. Back across the bridge, past the bakery, the fountain, the alleyway, the chapel. People were out and out chatting, tending shops, waving. The town had come fully awake, but as she walked, she knew something remained. A quietness in her chest, a stillness that the rain had left behind, a message written not in words, but in footsteps and mist and shared bread. The town had not changed, but she had, just slightly, and that was enough. Mira had come to this town seeking rest, drawn by tales of cobbled streets and ancient trees, hoping to lose herself in a place that welcomed wanderers without questions. She found it in hushed corners, unweathered doorsteps, and shared glances across the market square. The town was a sigh in the rustling leaves, a melody in the fountain's trickle, a story in the lines on an old woman's face. Its rhythm seeped into her, a quiet solace after a life lived too loudly. But as the days lengthened and the town's gentle cadence filled her, a whisper echoed within her. She had found peace here, yes, but something remained, a restlessness, a question mark left unanswered. It tugged at her, urging her onward. So as the weeks turned, she packed what little she had left, a few worn sketches, a handful of poems, and a heart full of gratitude. She returned to the old house. The scent of rain and earth lingered in the air. Sunlight slanted through gaps in the boarded windows, illuminating motes that danced in the stillness. The rocking chair on the porch creaked gently. Time seemed to stretch and bend here, untethered from the relentless march she'd known for so long. The orchard beyond was a riot of color and buzzing life. Blossoms heavy on the trees, bees drunk on nectar. The river murmured secrets to the weeping willows that dipped their branches to listen. In the square, Mrs. Ello stood in the doorway of a bakery, her silhouette framed by the oven's glow. She held a loaf aloft, her smile crinkling the corners of her eyes. Inside, the air was alive with the scent of yeast and sugar. Through the window, Mira saw the familiar choreography of flour, dusted hands kneading dough, rolling it out, shaping each piece with practiced ease, a quiet symphony of creation, born of tradition and touch. The potter was at his wheel, too, lost in the slow alchemy of earth and water. He spoke without turning, his voice a low rumble, a commentary on the steady dance of his hands, guiding coaxing, creating. His words wove a tapestry of tales from clay and glaze, of landscapes and lives captured in ceramic skin. And when Mira reached the fountain, the elderly woman was there, too, perched on its edge, feeding scraps to the waiting cats. Her gnarled hands moved with a lifetime of practiced grace, scattering crumbs and murmuring words of comfort to the felines, each purr a testament to lives intertwined. This town was more than bricks and mortar, more than cobblestones and chimneys. It was a mosaic of moments, memories breathed into existence by generations. It was a poem etched in stone, a song woven into the fabric of every day. And she, a wandering verse, had found a place in its state. Here, the past wasn't buried. It was nurtured, tended like the roses climbing the old blue house, reaching for the sun, seeking beauty even in the face of time's relentless march. Here, endings weren't final. They were transitions, stories, folded into the town's rich tapestry, waiting for the right moment to be unfurled once more. Her time here was ending, but the town's story would continue, carrying her within it, a note in its grand symphony, a brushstroke on its canvas, a heartbeat in its ancient core. For towns like this, don't forget, they're wanderers. They hold them close, weaving their essence into the very fabric of their being. And when the wind whispers through the leaves, when the rain murmurs on the rooftops, when the fountain dances in the sunlight, they remember. It's like finding a half-remembered dream, a melody from a forgotten song. Today we share a rereading of a timeless tale, one that reminds us the quietest corners often hold the loudest echoes. Join us as we revisit a cherished classic, the whispers of second chances and the magic woven into everyday moments. As the sun climbed higher and the shadows shrunk, the town woke to the sound of dripping. Water clung to window panes like crystal teardrops. Rose bushes dripped perfume on wet stones. Even the fountain in the market square sighed with moisture, a silver thread glistening down its chipped marble lip. This was a morning for lingering indoors, for sipping warm tea and letting the rain wash the world clean outside. Or so everyone thought. For, in a room overlooking the cobbled street, a girl dressed in lavender was lacing up her boots. Her name was Mira. She had hair, the color of wheat, and eyes that shifted with the sky. When the rain fell, the town whispered secrets only she could hear. By mid-morning, the sleepy town was fully awake but still slow, still thoughtful, as if it honored the silence that the rain had left behind. Mira walked without hurry. Her umbrella, closed now, rested against her shoulder, like a walking stick from a long and gentle journey. Every corner of the town looked newly washed, as though it had been painted again overnight. The bricks shone deeper red, the ivy greener, the air full of the scent of soil and bread and stone. The black cat no longer followed her. It had vanished somewhere between the bakery and the orchard, as cats tend to do, appearing for one chapter, then slipping out before the next. But Mira didn't mind. Some companions are meant only for a portion of the road. She turned onto Willow Bend Street, one of the quietest lanes in town, where lampposts still wore iron curls and doorbells sounded like old music boxers. It was a street of remembrance. Every window here seemed to hold a face from long ago's, not of sorrow, but of gentleness. Halfway down, she stopped. There was a window box filled with they spilled over the edge, purple and bright against the weathered sill. Mira reached out and gently touched a petal. Cool, soft, still holding a drop of rain like a word unspoken. She smiled. The violet was her grandmother's favorite. Further along, she came upon the bookbinding shop. It was barely a shop, really just a room behind an arched green door, with a sign that read Stories Restored. The bell above the door chimed once as she stepped inside. Dust hung in the air like soft snow. Stacks of leather-bound volumes lined the walls. Many missing titles. Some rested open on tables. A pot of glue simmered on a small stove. The air smelled of paper and pine and quiet effort. An old man in spectacles looked up from his stitching frame. He didn't ask why she was there. Instead, he nodded toward a corner shelf. There, she found it. A copy of The Umbrella Girl, A Childhood Story. She long forgotten but used to ask her grandmother to read over and over. The cover was faded now, the edges frayed. She opened it. Inside, in loopy cursive, her own name, to Mira, on rainy days. And her breath caught. She closed the book, gently, as if it were something living. Outside again, the clouds had thinned to wisps. Children ran down the slope near the chapel, shrieking with laughter, a kite darting behind them like a bright red bird. A dog barked happily. A woman in a straw hat hung quilts out too dry. Myra passed the fountain once more now, just a mirror of the sky. She walked toward the northern edge of town, to the place where the streets thinned into dirt paths, and the hills folded up like an old blanket. And there, beneath a chestnut tree, stood a woman with a blue satchel. She looked up as Mira approached. Her hair was streaked with gray. Her eyes were kind. She held a notebook in her hand, and a thermos tucked beneath her arm. "I thought I might find you here," she said. Mira tilted her head. "Do I know you?" The woman smiled. "Not yet, but I know your walk. I used to take it myself." There was a silence between them, not awkward, just open. The woman patted the bench beneath the tree. "Join me." Mira nodded and sat. They sipped tea from the thermos. It tasted of mint and lemon and something else, something herbal and grounding. "You've been listening to the town," the woman said. "Yes," Mira said. "Or maybe it's been listening to me." The woman smiled. "It does that." Together, they watched the horizon shift. A light wind stirred the leaves. Bees hovered above. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang, not the town's own, but another, fainter, from a village across the fields. "I don't live here anymore," the woman said, "but I come back to walk, even after the rain stops. Especially after," she said. "That's when you see what's changed." Mira looked down at her hands. They were the same, and not the same. After a while, the woman stood. It was good to sit. Mira stood too. "Thank you for the tea." The woman nodded. "When you leave the town one day, remember, it never leaves you. It just becomes part of how you walk." Then she turned, crossed the path, and disappeared into the trees. Mira stood for a while longer, watching the place where the woman had vanished. Then she opened her umbrella, not because it was raining, but because it felt like the right thing to do. It bloomed above her like a poem. She walked back slowly, past the violets, the fountain, the bakery. The square was full, now of people, of chatter, of life. Someone played an accordion near the tea house steps. A small crowd had gathered. Mira paused. A little girl tugged her sleeve. "You are the lady with the umbrella, aren't you?" she asked. Mira nodded, unsure what to say. The girl grinned and pointed to a red paper boat floating in the fountain. "We made it for you." Then she ran off to join the others. Mira stood in the middle of the square. She looked up. No rain. Just a sky open enough to walk into. She held her umbrella high, not against the weather, but like a banner, a memory, a reminder. Then she walked on, into the next quiet street, into the next gentle hour. In the sleepy town watched her go, never loud, never final, just there, like a page, waiting for someone to read it again. This story is a reminder that sometimes the most profound connections are found in the quietest of places, in the soft whisper of raindrops, or the gentle rustle of leaves underfoot. As always, dear listeners, we hope this story finds you well. If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more enchanting stories. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, may your days be filled with a little magic and a lot of heart. Thank you for listening. Today's story is called The One with the Umbrella. And thank you so much to my supporters who help keep the lights on over here. If you enjoy these videos, please consider supporting us. Your support helps keep our lights on and our bellies full, while we work hard bringing stories like today to folks like you. So thank you. And now, on with the show. By late afternoon, the shadows had softened, stretching across the cobblestones like long-lost letters written in light. The sleepy town had reached that in-between hour, the hush, before dinner pots clink, before lamps glow behind lace curtains. It was a time for slow returnings, of footsteps retracing paths, of memory rising like steam from a cup of tea. Mira wandered with her umbrella closed at her side. She wasn't heading anywhere now. The walk had become something else. Not a journey, not even a loop, but a quiet threading of herself back through the fabric of the town. Every street had changed her just a little. She passed the post office. The door stood propped open, and a tabby cat lounged in the window, purring in the sunlight. Inside, the postmaster was humming softly as he sorted envelopes into wooden slots. Mira stepped in. "Afternoon," the postmaster said, without looking up. "Letter for you." He reached beneath the counter and pulled out a small envelope. No stamp, no handwriting. Just her name on the front in charcoal gray. Mira took it, puzzled. Opened it slowly. Inside, a single line written in script she hadn't seen in years. "You rewalking the story we once dreamed." And her breath caught. The ink looked slightly smudged, as if it had been sealed during the last of the rain. "Who left this?" she asked. The postmaster shrugged. "Dropped off this morning. No name, just said it was meant for the one with the umbrella." Mira held the note against her heart for a moment, then nodded and stepped back outside. The town was changing again. Soft smells of roasting vegetables and fresh dough began curling through the air. Wind chimes sang at the corners of porches. A boy chased a dog up the lane. A girl in a red scarf stood on tiptoe to light a lantern beside a window. Mira passed a fountain once more. A paper boat still floated in its center. Someone had added another, this one, folded from yellow parchment, its edges painted with stars. She smiled. The square was more alive now. People moved slowly, but with purpose. Some still held umbrellas dry now, but carried like keepsakes. It seemed Myra's walk had caught on. A shopkeeper waved. A young couple nodded as they passed. A child handed her a plum from a woven basket and ran off, giggling. And always the quiet, not absence, but presence. Not silence, but peace. She turned down Lantern Way, a small winding street she'd almost forgotten. This was the path her grandmother used to take after rainstorms, carrying seed packets and folded poems in her apron. Mira used to follow with her boots too big and her pockets full of stones. At the end of the lane stood the greenhouse, overgrown now, glass fogged with age. But the door still opened with a creak, and inside, the warmth wrapped around her like an old cardigan. Plants still grew here. Not many, but enough. Vines trailing from rusted hooks, ferns reclaiming corners, and in the center, a small tree with golden leaves, not native, not wild, planted once with hope. Beneath it, a bench carved with initials. N&M, she sat. The light filtered through broken panes, speckling the dirt floor. Wind whispered through the gaps. She could almost hear her grandmother's voice, soft, amused, full of stories the world had forgotten how to tell. Mira opened her umbrella and held it above her for no reason at all, just to feel the shape of shelter. As evening approached, the bells rang softly from the clock. Tower 5's slow chimes, deep and kind. She walked back through the town as windows flickered to life, one by one. Smoke curled from chimneys. Soup pots clanged. Laughter warmed the stones. She passed the old theater, where the marquee still read, "Tonight, only the rain remembers." No play was ever performed there. But the sign never changed. The town liked it that way, near the edge of town. Mira reached the bridge again. The river below had slowed, its surface glassy, dark, and full of stars. Fireflies had begun to rise from the reeds. They blinked softly in the dusk, like forgotten wishes waking up for the night. On the far side of the bridge stood a lamplighter. He wore a patched vest, a crooked hat, and held a long brass pole. He moved from post to post, lifting the glass, striking a small flame, and restoring each light with quiet precision. When he saw Mira, he tipped his hat. "Still walking?" She nodded. "Still listening?" He smiled. "Then the town's still speaking." She watched as he lit the last lantern and disappeared down the hill. his flame dancing ahead of him like a story retold. Mira leaned on the bridge railing. Above her, stars bloomed like lanterns across the sky. Below her, the river hummed a lullaby in low ripples. Behind her, the town glowed, no longer sleepy, but dreaming. She opened her umbrella, again not against the weather, but as a gesture, a signal, a soft declaration that this walk, this listening, this being with the town it would never quite end. She closed her eyes, the umbrella above her, the bridge beneath, the night around. And somewhere in the distance, just audible beneath the hush, came the faintest sound of a story beginning again. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please share your thoughts with us in the comments or on social media. You can find links to ways you can support the show in the description. If you're a fan of this story, you might also enjoy some of our other stories about magical places and the people who call them home. You can find a playlist of those stories in the description or in the cards. And remember, if you are braver than you think, you're braver than you believe. I've always loved fairy tales, especially those magical moments where ordinary people step into extraordinary worlds or discover hidden magic in everyday places. But it took me a long time to find stories that captured the quiet magic of those moments. And so I began writing them myself. This is a story that explores the concept of a special place that holds memories and stories. It's called The Girl Who Walked Backwards. It's easy to forget that there's magic in the mundane. Life gets busy. Days blur together. And sometimes it feels like life is passing us by without any pause to notice its beauty or listen to its whispers. That's why I love creating stories that remind us to appreciate the little things. Like this story about a girl who discovers a hidden meadow filled with magic and wonder. Mira lived in a town that seemed frozen in time. Cobbled streets echoed with the ghost of horse-drawn carts. Buildings leaned into each other as if sharing secrets. Fountains dripped melodies into the squares. Even the lampposts hummed with stories from evenings past. But Mira had a secret, too. Every night she walked, when the moon climbed high and the shadows lengthened, she'd pull her threadbare coat tighter, tuck a worn umbrella beneath her arm, and set off into the deepening twilight. Her walks had no destination. She didn't even know what she was seeking, but there was a comfort in the quiet rustle of her footsteps on cobblestones, the gentle sway of the umbrella in the breeze, and the hushed lullaby of the night. One evening, as the sky bruised with twilight, Mira found herself in the town square. A weathered statue of a poet stood in the middle of the square. His fingers twitched as if ready to inscribe the next verse on his fingertips. As Mira approached, she noticed a small crowd gathered around the base of the statue. They were silent, but their bowed heads and somber clothes spoke of sadness. Curiosity tugged at Mira, urging her closer. As she joined the group, a woman brushed against her arm, her fingers cold as winter frost. "Why have they come here?" Mira whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The woman looked up, her eyes mirroring the grayness of the sky. "To say goodbye," she murmured, gesturing to the statue. "He died tonight." The words hung in the air, like a half-forgotten melody. As the minutes ticked by, Mira understood. These people weren't merely mourning a poet. They were grieving the fading echoes of their own stories. With each breath, they were losing a piece of their shared history. She closed her eyes, picturing the town without the poet's stories, without the songs he'd sung to chase away the darkness. It would be dimmer somehow, colder, emptier. Desperation tightened its grip on her heart. She couldn't bear the thought of the town succumbing to the suffocating silence of forgotten tales. So in a voice barely louder than the rustling leaves, Mira began to recite one of the poet's most beloved verses. The others fell silent, their gazes turning to her in surprise. Mira's cheeks flushed, but she pressed on. The poem wove magic into words, painting pictures of moonlight on cobblestones and starlight dancing in ancient fountains. By the time she finished, the sky had deepened to the color of ink, the stars pricking its surface like celestial embroidery, and the faces around her, etched with grief a moment before, now shone with a faint glimmer of remembrance. The older woman reached out, her touch as fleeting as a moth's wing. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have given him back to us, for a while." "At least," Mira nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She didn't understand the full weight of her actions. But as the townspeople slowly dispersed, their steps lighter than before, she realized she had done something important. She had reminded them that even as the darkness crept in, stories could serve as lighthouses, guiding them back to the shores of their shared past. As Mira continued her nightly walk, the events in the square echoed in her mind. The experience stirred something within her, a quiet determination to preserve the fading hues of their collective memory. She wandered through the moon-dappled streets, each turn revealing a new facet of the sleeping town. She passed the shuttered bakery, its warmth lingering in the air, the scent of yeast and dreams clinging to the window frames. She walked by the schoolhouse, where chalk sketches of fantastical creatures adorned the blackboards, remnants of children's imaginations run wild. And as she rounded a corner, she came upon the grand library, its windows glowing with a soft, inviting light. Hesitantly, she pushed open the heavy oak door and stepped inside. Towering shelves lined the walls, holding countless stories, each book a portal to a different world. Mira moved deeper into the library, her gaze tracing the spines of the ancient volumes, until she found herself standing before a heavy, ornately carved desk. Behind it sat a wizened old man with twinkling eyes and a long white beard that reached his knees. He looked up from a massive leather-bound tome and regarded her with a knowing smile. "Lost, child?" he asked, his voice as rich in age as the books surrounding them. Mira hesitated, unsure how to articulate the turmoil in her heart. She sat down heavily on a nearby chair, the wood sighing beneath her weight. "I don't know what to do," she finally whispered, tears threatening to spill. The librarian leaned back in his chair, his smile widening. "Then let the stories guide you," he said, his eyes twinkling. "For within these pages lie the echoes of countless lives, each a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Their stories may hold the answers you seek." Mira felt a jolt of hope. She didn't know much about stories, but she loved them. And in that moment, the librarian's words resonated like a beacon in the darkness. With newfound determination, she rose and walked deeper into the library. The shelves seemed to part before her, guiding her toward a section filled with volumes bound in blue. As she reached out to touch one, a story unfolded in her mind, a tale of a young girl who discovered a hidden garden where flowers bloomed in hues of forgotten dreams. Intrigued, Mira opened the book. The scent of lavender and old parchment filled her senses, and she lost herself in the fantastical world between the pages. As the night deepened, Mira journeyed through the tale, each turn revealing more pieces of the puzzle that had brought her to this moment. When dawn began to paint the sky with soft hues, she emerged from the library, her heart lighter, her steps surer. The rising sun seemed to greet her with a newfound warmth, and the familiar streets appeared as if seen for the first time. Mira understood now that her connection to the town ran deeper than she'd imagined. She was a weaver of memories, a keeper of stories, and as long as she walked its streets, the town would live on in her heart, and in her retellings, its spirit would endure. Thank you for joining me on this walk down memory lane. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing. Your support means the world to me. Until next time, keep listening to the quiet music of your soul, for it holds the echoes of stories waiting to be told. "I'm glad I didn't miss the best part," he said. "I walked this town when it rained, but I was never alone. The town walked back toward me." "Well, then it wasn't really a goodbye," she says. "As long as we keep walking, we never do leave a place, do we? You just take a little bit of it with you." In the quietest parts of this sleepy town, stories were hiding. Some were whispered in lamplight, some carved in wood or stitched in cloth, but most lay sleeping, waiting for someone to come and wake them. That someone was her. Mira. She woke up to it, to the whispers, the carvings, the stories, and in waking, became the story too. This is the sleepy town. This is the umbrella, and this is the walk they made. Morning light had fully arrived, not with fanfare, but with the quiet confidence of something eternal. The sleepy town had officially awakened, but gently, as it always did. Smoke curled softly from chimneys. Windows opened, like eyes, stretching toward the sun. A bicycle bell chimed twice. Somewhere, toast burned slightly. And still, the hush lingered. Not silence, but a kind of reverence for the slowness that defined this place. Mira remained in the square. Her umbrella rested against the bench beside her, no longer open its canopy, now dry and peaceful, like a closed book that had told all it needed for now. She sipped tea from a paper cup a passerby had handed her, chamomile and clove. It warmed her hands and reminded her that people noticed even in a town that rarely said things aloud. Then came the scent of rain again. Not falling, but remembered. A carriage rolled past, its wheels echoing on the cobblestone like a familiar poem. Behind it, a trail of petals scattered from a basket, pale lavender and pressed gold. Mira watched as the wind tucked them into the corners of doorsteps and beneath cafe chairs. Then, at the edge of the square, something new. A canvas tent. It hadn't been there before. No one had seen it go up, but there it stood, white, sunlit, trimmed with tiny bells that chimed when the breeze passed through. A hand-painted sign hung beside the entrance. The listening tent, only open to walkers. Mira rose, picked up her umbrella, and stepped inside. When she reached out to steady herself on the slanted ceiling, her fingers brushed against something cool and smooth. For a moment, she could have sworn she heard a chime, but when she turned, there was nothing there. Just a faint smell of rain. Here, she knew instinctively, everything changed. But also, nothing had ever been more obvious. The air within the tent was scented with cedar and rain-dried paper. It was dim but welcoming, like the inside of an old clock or the beginning of a story. Chairs lined the edges, all mismatched rockers, stools, velvet armchairs. At the center sat a low table with dozens of small books, each bound in cloth, each marked with a symbol. A boot print, a feather, a raindrop, a window. A woman sat behind the table. She had a long braid streaked with silver, and she wore a scarf patterned like rooftops. She looked up when Mira entered. "You've come far," she said, not as a question. "I've walked," Mira replied simply. The woman smiled and gestured to the table. "These are the stories people leave behind, the ones the town writes down when no one's looking." Mira's fingers hovered over the books. You may read one," the woman said, "and you may write one, but only one." Mira chose a book marked with a feather. Inside, written in delicate, slanted script, "I once dreamed I lived inside a cloud. Everyone spoke in bells. I didn't know my name, but I remembered how to love things. The umbrella showed me the way down." She closed the book softly, then took a blank one, its cover etched with a quiet raindrop, and she wrote, "I walked a sleepy town when it rained, but I was never alone. The town walked back toward me, in shadows and tea steam, in bells and letters, in a boy's drawing and a woman's knowing smile. I didn't change the town. I let it remember me." She placed the book on the table and turned to leave. The woman gave her a small nod. "It will keep your words well." Outside, the day had shifted again, slanting toward late morning. Mira wandered toward the river, where the reeds swayed in rhythm with the breeze. The bridge stood quiet, its stones still damp with night. There, leaning against a railing, was the boy. Again the one with the notebook, scarf fluttering. "You found the tent," he said. "Yes." "What did you write?" Mira smiled. "Something I didn't know I knew." He nodded. "That's how it always goes." From his satchel, he pulled out a folded square of parchment, handed it to her. "Here," he said. For the next part, Mira opened it. It was a map not of streets, but of moments, drawn in soft charcoal lines. It showed things like where the bells forget and the dreams begin, the narrow stairs that lead to whispers, the window box filled with wishes, a rusted swing set and a half-forgotten lullaby, the old oak where stories grow, the worn rug in the shoemaker's shop, the exact spot where the two paths meet, and at the center, a mark shaped like a spiral. Beneath it, written in careful script, where the walk ends and the listening begins again. Mira traced the spiral with her finger. "Where is this?" The boy grinned. "Nowhere, but also right behind the clock tower." They walked there together. Behind the tower, past Eva-covered walls, and a gate that creaked like an old story being retold. They found it. A spiral stone path, laid into the grass, surrounded by nothing but sky and silence. Mira stepped into it. Each step felt like a return. She didn't speak. Neither did the boy. At the center of the spiral was a small metal disc. She knelt and read its inscription. Here, the town listens back. Close your umbrella. Close your eyes. What you walked is still walking. Mira did just that. She folded her umbrella, closed her eyes, and in that stillness, she heard it not voices, not sounds, but presence. The fountain, the paper boats, the cello music, the girl lighting the lantern, the letter at the post office, the echo in the greenhouse, her grandmother's footsteps, the umbrella's soft. Russell, all of it's not gone, just listening back. She opened her eyes. The boy was gone. Only the spiral remained, and somewhere behind her, the bells of the town rang out 10 times, soft, rounded, like a breath taken after a long dream. Mira stood, lifted her umbrella, and walked again, because that's what the town asked for. That's what the umbrella remembered. That's what the dream of the sleepy town always was. Not a place, not a story, but a walk, and the ones who walk it never truly leave. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to see more videos like this, please don't forget to turn on notifications. This is your host. I hope you enjoyed today's extra special story. If you would like to support us in creating these special podcast versions of our videos, you can go to our support page. We release these podcast versions exclusively for our supporters. So this is a great way to support us and get some extra content as well. Before we get started, I want to ask you a question. What are you waiting for? Maybe something good to happen, an opportunity, a sign, a yes. Sometimes we wait for things that are outside of our control. We have no power over. But sometimes we wait for things because we're afraid. We're afraid to take a risk. We're afraid of what might happen if we reach for what we want. Are you waiting for anything right now? Is there something you've been putting off doing? Something you wanted to try? Something you've been meaning to do, but haven't gotten around to yet? What is it, and why are you waiting? Evening settled over the sleepy town like a lullaby, stitched in velvet. The rooftops wore amber halos, and every window flickered with its own small story. The world had narrowed into the tender hush between supper and sleep, where the clatter of dishes slowed. The books were opened, and shadows softened into silk. Mira sat on the bench beside the fountain, her umbrella open beside her, not as a shield, but as a companion. It caught the starlight in its curved ribs, casting a gentle arc of shadow across the stone. The 2 paper boats still floated lazily in the water, spinning slowly in the circular current. The yellow one had collapsed slightly, waterlogged. But brave, from a nearby window came the hum of a cello, low and slow, as if the night itself had found a voice. Mira closed her eyes. She wasn't walking now, not with her legs, but the walk had never truly been about movement. It was something else, something quieter, a kind of drifting awareness, a way of being with the town as it breathed. She rose eventually, gently, as if not to disturb the mood. The umbrella came with her, and the bench remained empty, but not alone. She turned toward Old Chapel Hill, where the road curled like a ribbon into the highest point of the village. The hill was steep and rarely walked at night, but Mira felt drawn there, as though the town itself had whispered, "Come see the stars from the top." Her boots crunched softly over gravel. The lamplight thinned as she climbed, giving way to moonlight. And then at the crest of the hill, she saw it. The town stretched out below like a glowing constellation of windows and lanterns. Chimneys sent up their whispers of smoke. The rivers shimmered like dark silk. The world was hushed, held, holy. She stood beneath a lone ash tree, its branches creaking gently in the breeze. There was a bench here, too, half covered in moss, forgotten by most. She sat on it and rested the umbrella across her lap. The stars overhead were impossibly close. Mira felt as though she could name them, and then she heard footsteps, soft ones, barely more than the hush of grass. A figure emerged from the darkness, a boy, perhaps 10 years old, with a blue wool scarf and a notebook pressed to his chest. He paused when he saw her. "I didn't think anyone else came up here," he said. "I didn't think anyone else still did," Mira replied. The boy hesitated, then approached. "Can I sit?" She nodded, and he lowered himself beside her with a sigh that belonged to someone older. They sat in silence for a while. The stars said everything. Finally, the boy opened his notebook. Inside were sketches not of people or places, but of ideas. A boot print filled with flowers. A window that blinked. A street lamp growing leaves. "I draw dreams," he said quietly. "Ones I can't explain. Mostly after the rain." Mira smiled. "That's when the best ones come." The boy looked at her. "You're the umbrella girl, aren't you?" She raised an eyebrow. "Am I?" He nodded. "That's what they say, that you walk the town when it rains, and it listens to you." She chuckled softly. "Maybe, or maybe I'm just listening to it." The boy flipped to a fresh page. "Do you ever dream of leaving?" Mira thought she had. Many times, in younger years, the world beyond the hills had glimmered like a promise. But now returning felt more like magic than departure ever had. "Sometimes," she said, "but then I remember, this place doesn't end at its edges. It walks with you, wherever you go." The boy nodded solemnly. "That's what I'm afraid of. I don't want to forget it." "You won't," she said, "if you remember how to listen." He drew then quietly, quickly, with a kind of knowing beyond his years. When he turned the notebook toward her, Mira gasped softly. It was her drawn beneath the sycamore tree, umbrella open in the rain. But above her was not just the town, it was the sky, the stars, the paper boats, the winding streets, the whole sleepy town folded into the curve of her umbrella. "It's not just a story," the boy said. "It's how the town remembers." Myra's eyes shimmered. They sat in stillness, two dreamers looking down upon a dreaming town. Eventually, the boy closed his book, stood, and looked eastward, where the first hint of dawn glow touched the edge of the world. "I have to go," he said, "to dream some more. To wake up," he whispered, like a secret, and with that, he vanished into the trees. Mira remained, her umbrella catching starlight and shadows both. The night was slipping toward morning now, but the world didn't rush. Even the wind was slow. Even time bowed its head. She stood, descended the hill, walked the empty streets again familiar, now not as routes, but as pages in a story. As she reached the square, the paper boats were gone. Perhaps they had sunk, or sailed on, or turned into stars. Mira stopped beneath the sycamore, where her walk had begun days ago. She opened the umbrella one last time, held it over her shoulder, and whispered, "Thank you." The town didn't reply, but she felt something stir. A warm hush, a gentle nod, the kind of reply that only comes from places that don't speak in words, but in weather and echoes, and the way shadows lean toward you when you're not looking. What are you waiting for? Sometimes we wait for answers, for signs, for directions, but maybe the journey is the answer. Maybe the sign is the journey. Maybe the direction is the journey. Where are you going? What are you searching for? Maybe you're closer than you think. Mira found her way to the whispering bench. Sometimes we find our way back to places, to people, to ourselves. Sometimes we find what we've been looking for all along. Waiting for the perfect time is a way of never starting. Waiting for the perfect moment is a way of never ceasing. Mira waited for the moment to be still, to be quiet, to be whole. And in that waiting, she found the moment. Waiting for a sign isn't always about looking for something new. Sometimes it's about seeing what's always been there. Mira waited for the sign to walk again, and the sign was the rain, was the path, was the whisper of the town. She walked again. What are you waiting for? Mira waited for a chance to understand, a chance to know, a chance to belong. And in that waiting, she found the chance. What are you waiting for? Are you waiting for a sign, or are you waiting for yourself? Mira waited for the sign to keep walking. And the sign was the bench, was the stars, was the boy who dreamed. She kept walking. What are you waiting for? It's day 3 of our story, Spine Week. Today we're exploring this prompt. After a main character wanders into a town that seems asleep, they discover what it means to be truly awake. Before we dive in, a quick reminder. If you love stories like this, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an upload. Also, thank you so much for your amazing support. Our community is growing, and it's because of people like you. So again, thank you. Now let's dive into the story. The town was fully awake now, but it didn't feel loud. It never did. Even its liveliest hours had the quiet grace of turning pages. The bell tower struck 11. Sunlight spilled through lace curtains. Laundry danced on rooftop lines. Children's voices floated like kites above the square, but gently, like they too knew the town's heartbeat and Mira walked one last time. The umbrella was closed in her hand, not because the journey was over, but because it had been understood. There comes a moment when you no longer need the lantern to see, only to remember it once lit your way. She paused at the cobblestone bridge. The river moved slowly, like time being stirred with a silver spoon. On its surface floated one final paper boat larger than the rest, its hull painted with tiny gold stars. Mira leaned down. Inside the boat lay a single key, tied with a thread of red wool. There was no note, but some things don't need explanation. She took the key and walked past the greenhouse, where the flowers had bloomed overnight into soft explosions of pastel fire, past the tea shop, where the woman with the braid and the rooftop scarf now sat quietly, sipping from a chipped cup, her eyes meeting Mira's with the weight of shared silence. Past a schoolyard, where someone had drawn a large chalk spiral, just like the stone path behind the whole town seemed to be echoing back, as if every street and stone whispered, "We saw you walk." She came to a narrow alley, one she'd never noticed before. The key in her hand pulsed slightly, like a heartbeat, as if nudging her forward. At the end of the alley was a door. It was small, wooden, worn, smooth by time, painted a deep, sleep moss green. Above it, carved into the arch, were the words, "For those who remember in walking." Mira inserted the key. The lock turned without resistance. Inside, a spiral staircase. Dust danced in shafts of amber light. The air smelled like lavender and library shelves. She climbed slowly, each footfall soft and certain. At the top, a round room. The walls were lined with umbrellas, hundreds of them, all different. Some patched and faded, some glowing with color, some translucent, some shaped like flowers or stars, others that looked more like wings than shelters. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on it, a book bound in deep indigo cloth, embossed with a symbol, an open umbrella over a winding path. Mira approached, opened the book, blank pages. Then, slowly, words began to appear in her own hand. Not the hand that held pens, but the one that held moments. She walked, and the rain listened. She listened, and the town spoke. She spoke, and the umbrella opened not to shield, but to reveal. Each street a sentence, each shadow a sigh, each silence a song. Mira turned the pages. There it was, all of it. The lanterns, the cello music, the greenhouses, the clock tower spiral, the boy with the notebook, the tent, the paper boats, her grandmother's rainlight whisper, and her walk, her presence, all written, all witnessed, all remembered. A chair waited by the window. She sat, opened the umbrella in her lap, and let it breathe. Not for protection, not for weather, but as a symbol of noticing, of receiving, of walking without rushing. The town below glimmered, not in gold or silver, but in memory. She could see the square, the bakery, the riverside bench, the listening tent, and the fountain where feathers still floated. Everything was still here. But now, she was, too. As the sun reached its peak, Mira stood once more. She placed her umbrella on the wall, beside the others. Its handle shimmered faintly, part wood, part something softer, like wind woven into form. She left the book open, let it continue writing on its own. Some pages were not hers to fill. Back in the square, the world hummed and warmed. The sleepy town, no longer sleepy, was still gentle, still kind, still listening. Mira walked without needing to arrive, because the walk had always been the arrival. She passed children dancing around a chalk spiral. She passed the cafe, where the waitress now carried teacups that steamed with jasmine and memory. She passed the fountain, where someone had placed the final paper boat on the ledge, not to send off, but to keep. A message remained inside. Thank you for walking. Your quiet made room for the story. Mira sat on the bench one last time. She breathed deeply. The sky was endless, not in its size, but in its softness. The umbrella, now a memory in her hand, folded itself like a letter that had been read. The rain had stopped long ago, but something sacred still fell. Something slower than water, quieter than snow, something only walkers could feel. And then she rose, not to leave, not to end, but to continue the most beautiful thing the sleepy town had ever taught her. The art of walking softly through a world that whispers. If you enjoyed this story, here are 2 other stories you might like. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an upload. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.